Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And for those who do know me, I am here at 9 o'clock on the dot, meaning I managed to get a battery into my wall clock. It was kind of embarrassing. I have been so good with my consistency for so long now, so long that I couldn't even say for sure when I started in on my consistency. It has been a process for me. If you guys have been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know that I am big in doing things in baby steps, not feeling that rush or that pressure from others, right? Or the contradictions or the doubts that quite often are thrown at you to make you feel like you're on the wrong path, that you'll never make it. And, it's important for me to keep going. And, it's not just to keep going because I think someday I'm going to get somewhere, that I'm going to be like a Logan Paul or a Mr. Beast. But the fact that I kept going for myself, that I have something to believe in, and that belief is in myself. And that is the greatest gift that I could have ever given myself. But I would never have given that to myself if I hadn't done this in baby steps. I was programmed, meaning I was brought up in that pressure, in that hairy, scary, in the unexpected from one moment to another. Life has been a constant change, a constant uphill battle. I don't know. I've always taken my piece of the pie. It's always been important for myself because life is hard, life is difficult, that I wanted to enjoy life for as much as I possibly could. And that was a lesson that I learned off my father, who had congenital heart failure. And, he was diagnosed or prognosed very early in his adulthood. I don't even think he made it into his 20s before his doctor told him that he didn't have very long to live. And so my father decided to live every day to the fullest, right? My father actually lived to be 47 years old. But can you imagine waking up every single moment for those extra 27 years, every single moment, and be reminded that today could be your very last day? My father is not the only person in this world who did that. He certainly wasn't. There are lots of people who struggle and get prognoses or misdiagnosed, or even in their own mindset, to think that they're not going to live into their adulthood. I know for myself, there was that doubt in my life. I never thought that I would make it into my 30s because life was so difficult. And it's like that for lots of people. And so when you set goals and you have dreams, a lot of those goals and dreams are very short term, not meaning they're going to last just for a little while. They may, right? But I'm saying we don't look too far into the future because we don't think we have a future. We have the now, we have the experience and the adventures and the relationships that we have now. And, right, if like my dad, we have that opportunity, or myself, because I'm now 65 years old, right? I don't know how I got it into my head that I was only going to make it into my 30s and then I was going to be seeing adios myself. But that wasn't the case. I got to experience all those amazing dreams and goals that I set out for myself. Not to say that I had any expectations that they would happen, right? But following suit with my father, who also didn't know how long he was going to live. And he set goals, he set dreams for himself. But lots of times when you're somebody who lives in the moment, those are the trip ups, right? For me, I never saved money for the future because I never thought there was a future. Another trait that I took after my father, right? And because I never had any expectations for the future, because that was the way that I was brought up, that was what was projected on to me through those relationships that I had outside of my family, also. That was what I learned in school, in being dictated to by teachers who were disappointed in how I applied myself in class, in those constant sense of changing that was always coming into my life, right? Not by my choice, my dad's choice. My dad, I don't know, he was a big believer in change. That was for sure, because I practically, especially in the early years, I went to like two different schools every year until I hit high school. And then high school, I only went to two different high schools, maybe because my dad perceived that I was already starting to have some serious problems socially, and to be able to have those opportunities to possibly make friends, which I did. And because maybe he saw the impact of the constant change and what it brought into his family's life and what it did in his life. He loved change. He loved adventures and different experiences. And I went along for that ride because I loved living in the moment, right? Like I said, I never thought there was much of a future for myself, just like my father didn't think there was much future for himself, but for different reasons, right? For different reasons. But I picked up that trait for living in the moment, but carrying into my adulthood, right? And even reaching my 30s and finding that some of those dreams, wishes, goals that even though I didn't expect would come into my life, because I did baby steps, because I took little steps forward, because I took little baby bites, baby spoonfuls, things that I could digest, because I couldn't in my adulthood handle the big change, right? After my father passed away, oh, I wanted to be like a rock. I wanted to pretty much sit in one space. The least amount of change that could come into my life, the better, right? And but change found me anyway. And it was in that determination to live the best life for myself as I possibly could. And in wanting to live the best life that I possibly could, to give that to myself, change had to come about. But the only way I could do change was in baby steps. Hello, Kathy. Oh, thank you for coming in tonight, Kathy. I appreciate that. Tammy's off doing some caregiving this week. And yeah, I've been in here. The guys have popped in. every night. Malvin's popped in, Eugene pops in, but for the most part, I've been kind of hanging out on my own. If you want to put me on in the background, if you got things to do, you go right ahead. But I appreciate that you popped in, Kathy. That was really nice. I just thought I would talk a little bit about baby steps and getting things done, because lots of people, they can't handle the pressure, right? It's why they can't hold jobs very well. It's why they don't go up in the ladder in their positions, in their work environments. It's why they don't set goals for themselves, like buying a house, getting cars, right? Buying a piece of property. Why they don't pursue, those relationships, those very important relationships that result in families and children and change and responsibility. And that's a big one too, because in some of these experiences, we have a very hard time with responsibility. It's why we want to sit in one spot. It's because we do not like friction. We do not like conflict. We do not like change. And that's really kind of funny because I had a lot of change in my life. And yes, was I uncomfortable in it? Yes, I was uncomfortable in it, but I was used to it, right? It's that idea of being willing to expand, to stretch, and get out of your comfort zone. I didn't do it willingly. I kind of got dragged, screaming and kicking. Maybe not that bad. I didn't have much of a choice growing up. But I did it, and it was because that I did it that I was able to set goals. But when setting those goals, I didn't dive into them head first. The only ones that I did dive into head first and said, I got to achieve this is when I got a job. I tried my darndest to get to supervisor or management as fast as I could, just so I wouldn't have the authority breathing down my neck because I was non confrontational and because of the experiences that I had growing up, right? It was very hard for me to take criticism. And because I was already determined and because I became stubborn and independent, right? A bit of reclusive in my self protection of myself, that I stood up for myself. And it was a trait. It kept me safe, but at the same time, it gave me a set of confidence, right? It gave me some independence and it helped me to find my true self in a way. And it gave me a little bit of practice in getting out of my comfort zone, a little bit of practice in standing on my own 2 feet. I didn't take much guff. I'm thinking starting from my mid 20s to now, which I'm probably a little bit more independent that way, self protective, more outspoken in that care for myself. A good example of that, actually, just popped into my mind. I had to go to the grocery store today, and I wanted to get my blood pressure taken, so I wanted to go to the drugstore. And when I went there, I took my blood pressure. I put my keys down on the counter when I took my blood pressure, and I left my keys there. But then on the way home, I wanted to take the long way around and have a nice little morning walk because it was still early in the morning before it got super hot. I hope I don't lose my spot. That it got super, super hot. And so I took a long way home. And then just when I turned around at my block to get back to my apartment, I went, oh, where are my keys? Right? I better check my purse. I thought they were in my purse, but I don't know. Something came into my head. Look at my purse, grab my keys. Right? I'm still at the end of the block to my apartment, so normally I don't pull the keys on my purse until I get to the apartment. But for some reason, I looked and my keys weren't around my neck, and I went, oh darn! I left them at the I left them at the drugstore. I wasn't worried or stressed or anything because I remembered I left them sitting where I take my blood pressure, and I'm sure nobody wants my keys. If they found them, they would have turned them in to the cashier at the front counter, right? So I walked back to the drugstore and I walked to the blood pressure machine and it wasn't there. So I started walking back to the cashier, and the pharmacist, I guess, noticed me looking at the blood pressure machine and said, oh, are you looking for something? And I says, yeah, I left my keys here. You don't happen to have them, do you? And he held them up and I says, oh, you're a sweetheart. And I grabbed my keys back, right? And then I decided to go slowly in a different route and get home and just get a little bit of extra Mother Nature. But when I left to go to the drugstore, I grabbed my garbage bag to take out to the back and throw into the garbage bin. And when I went through the back door, there's some guy in the parking lot and he's yelling at me in a really aggressive tone. What are you doing? I'm throwing my garbage out, right? I'm throwing my garbage out. And I walked to the garbage pail and I threw my garbage bag into the garbage pail. And he goes, look what you did to the concrete. And I go, what? What did I do? And I'm looking at the ground. I don't see anything. You know, there are repairs all the time. And then he looked at the door. He says, look at the front door. You got footprints in front of the front door. You stepped into concrete. And I looked up at the door and I'm looking for a sign or something. And I says, excuse me, it might have been a good idea if you had put a sign up so that I would notice that the concrete was there. He goes, can't you see it? I says, look behind you. Look at all the patch marks all around you, right? That doesn't look anything different than any of those other patches on the pavement in the parking lot. I said, this is your fault, not my fault. And then I says, I really hope that concrete is not going to ruin my shoes because I was wearing my Keens, and you guys know how much I love my Keen brand, right? And I looked at the bottom of my shoe. It was okay, right? And I looked at him, and he just kind of huffed at me because he knew I was right. But he figured, oh, I'm just a little old lady, and he could let me have it for his mistake. And he was only ticked because he has to smooth it out again, right? He has to smooth it out again. But there was a time when I would have gone, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. And I would have fallen all over myself in that, right? And I wasn't mean about it. I was just straightforward, and I looked him straight in the eye, and I just told him, I says, that's not my fault. That's your fault. You should have had a sign on the door, right? And I hope my shoes aren't ruined, right? And I just left it at that. I could have made a big deal about going to the management's office and let them know how he talked to me, and I could have made a big deal, right? I just let it go at that because I could see on his face that he was kind of surprised that I called him on it, right? But also at the same time was the recognition that I was correct in that. And it's really funny because throughout my entire life, I have always been in moments where I knew I was right in the situation, but I've always made myself smaller. You know what I mean? I've always made the person, that Canadian trait where we always say I'm sorry, but I would go to the extent of taking all the blame for it. Oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe even right? Trying to repair things on my own when in the end it wasn't something that I was really responsible for, but because somebody decided I was going to be responsible for it, I was, because I was non confrontational. I didn't know how to stick up for myself. And, it was not having the confidence that, that I really mattered, right? And, that it was easier for me just to take the blame than to stand my ground, not in an aggressive way, but in a way that you're not turning the other cheek, right? You're not turning the other cheek, and you're not allowing somebody to go off and do that exact same thing to somebody else who actually is vulnerable, right? Because there's too much of that bullying going on in this world. And that's just a little teeny weeny one, right? But I was really kind of proud of myself. And that happened when I took the garbage out when I went to the drugstore. And I kind of gave it some thought and stuff. And it's funny when I was having this conversation that it actually popped into my mind again. Oh, that's a good example there, right? Because there are a lot of vulnerable out there that do allow themselves to be treated like doormats, right? Again, it's that idea that they're non confrontational, right? That maybe they feel that they don't have any bravery or courage in them. That, it's not that they don't know that they're right, that they have the smarts for that, because even as a child and as a teenager and as a young adult, I knew I had the intelligence and the know how. But because you're so often being brushed off to the side, that your opinion doesn't matter. If you have a better way of doing things, right? Well, the boss is going to say it, do this way, right? And if you say, oh, I don't think so, I think it'll be better this way, you're just targeting yourself that somebody is going to do that power thing on you. It's why it was so important for me when I got a job to automatically just work as hard as I could, multitask, shine. I didn't recognize that lots of times I would be outshining somebody else who would be wanting that position. And it wasn't my intent to do that. I didn't even recognize that I was kind of being a greedy grabber when it came to going for what I needed, not necessarily what I wanted. I didn't want those positions. I needed them because when I had something to say, or if I knew better, if I had a better directive, right? If something needed to be designated in an emergency, I was that person because I was so hyper vigilant, and in my upbringing and in those experiences that I had in my life, it was second nature for me, right? Because I was always looking out for the easiest, the fastest, the most cost efficient, the most non confrontational, right? The least disaster in an outcome. And it's usually why I would get those supervisory and management positions. But I didn't search them out, right? I had that confidence for myself. I had that courage and that knowledge myself. But I understood that nobody else cared what I had to say, right? Everybody else was on their own agenda. And so lots of times, if I wasn't on in charge, right? If I wasn't the head in the group or the network, that nobody would listen to me. I wouldn't be able to direct in a safe environment, just not for me, but for everybody, right? Again, it's like why those companies loved me as an employee, because I saved them lots of money, or I made them lots of money. I saved them lots of grief when it came to customer service and complaints to HR, you know, in those relationships, very much often dynamic relationships within the companies began in being able to bring myself down to somebody else's level to make them feel a little bit better, right? Of course, management might feel a little bit uncomfortable because I was running the show, but I didn't care. If there was a management and they let me run the show, I was good with that too. I wasn't looking for those positions as supervisor or management. I was just looking to be in control of my environment, right? And I'm not going to say just my environment, in the environment in general. And that was probably perceived by lots of people as control, right? Because that's what it was. It was control, but it wasn't control out of intent to be mean or the intent to be um, above anybody else, right? Lots of times in that bit of control that I did have, it was, it was searched out by me. I was always somebody that people would come to get my opinions. What do you think? Should we do it like this? And um, and I was happy to do that because again, that would save a lot of grief, a lot of mishaps. It would make some money or it would save some money, right? And so it worked out well for the owners, but for the management themselves, normally, right? I didn't take any consideration into that. I never even gave it a thought, right? That I was stepping on somebody else's position. They probably thought, like in my last job, that I was trying to take their job, right? And they knew very well that I wasn't, right? They just didn't figure that I was a team player for their directives. And that, to an extent, I would have to say that was true, only because I could see that it didn't work, right? But being the employee, I I did it as long as I could. I was the team player for as long as I could, but I could not puff smoke up somebody's butt who was not doing the job, right? In following the mission statement of the company that I worked for, that didn't care so much for the company that they just went and did it anyway, right? And made me very uncomfortable. And because I was so deep into the lessons already, I knew that these were people that I was not supposed to be around, right? And so I had conversations where I could have conversations to see if maybe we could resolve something and make a situation a little bit better. It couldn't be better. There was nothing I could do, right? I had to go. I had to leave, right? And I hope the company did well in that, but I knew in the end my absence was going to be the evidence in that. And in saying that, I have to say I'll be going up there tomorrow because I am going on to a festival on in the first week of August, and it's going to be absolutely amazing. It's 15 bands. It's heavy metal, right? It's old rock and roll, but the really heavy stuff, right? The Led Zeppelin and the Metallica and just the right White Snake. It's all that heavy electric guitars and stuff. It's still going to be lots of fun. It's camping. It's a pig roast. It's a great big party for a few days. I'm going to volunteer my time. I'm going to go a day early and set up there, help them set up for the festival. But I need a tripod because I'm going to be filming the experience. Is Melvin here? Oh, hello, Melvin. Hello, Melvin. It's nice to see you in here. That's twice this week that you popped into my live. If you've got some good cheer, throw it in the comments there and let us know what your good cheer. I always appreciate when you come in here and let me know what your good cheer is for the week. But yeah, it was something that I really wanted to do this year. I normally have not been able to do it because I haven't been able to find a babysitter for my cat, right? Because everybody's gone to the festival, so and I can't run the air conditioner for more than 4 hours because the air conditioner needs to be emptied, right, from the humidity. So I couldn't leave my cat in the heat. And this is the first year that I don't have my cat. So I told my sister for sure that this year I want to go. But I will be filming it, not just for my channel, but because it's a festival that the music festival that they put on 15 bands, and it's for the charity, it's for cancer, right, to raise money for cancer. So I'll probably do some promotional material for them to promote their pig roast for next year. This is their ninth year, so next year will be their 10th year of raising money for cancer, and they've raised quite a bit of money uh, for cancer. So if I can film some good promotional material for them, I'm happy to do it. But also, I'll be able to film it because it won't be copyrighted, right? Because um, what do you call that? It's copied, right? The music is all people out there who are just right. They're just copying the music and playing the music themselves. So it's not the original music that will be copyrighted. So I'll be able to feature the bands. And my brother in law has one of those bands. So I can put some clips together for him too. And he'll be going out early, doing a little bit of that volunteer work and setting up, and they've only got a few acres, but it's a pretty busy time when they put the festival on. I'm just going to stop 1 second, send some good cheer out there, get to your destination, be a false alarm, turn around, go right back to the station. But what I was going to say is tomorrow I'm going to go up to that little thrift store tomorrow and see if I can find a tripod because I need a tripod for my camera so I can do some proper filming. I've got little short tripods, but I don't have any big ones. So if I can get one thrifted, that's what I'll do. I sold a few. Well, I didn't sell a few items. I sold a item today, but it was enough to pay for my purchases if I wanted to go up there. And if they happen to have a tripod, I'll be able to get one tomorrow, right? Get that out of my budget. And yeah, it works out pretty good. Just when I need a few dollars, it dribbles in. But back to this idea of starting this conversation about living for the moment, right? And if you're somebody who lives for the moment, you don't think about living for the future. You can. It's just a matter of making the choice, right? You might not ever accomplish those goals and those dreams of yours, right? But there are lots of people out there who are not even trying, right? And I very easily could have been one of those people because, I had that opportunity to just stop in my life, to live the easy, quiet, non confrontational, a life that had no change in it at all, just in a kind of a standstill. And that was a pretty sad life for me, right? Creating this YouTube channel, it opened me up. But my life started opening up before then. And it was just in that process of setting your goals and setting your dreams. And a lot of these goals and dreams, I had them when I was like a teenager, like getting married, right? And I got to have my Cinderella fairy tale wedding because even though I wasn't moving towards that, right? It wasn't a goal, it was still a dream. And in that dreaming, you imagine and you make plans in your head anyway. So when that opportunity to get married happened, I knew exactly what my wedding was going to look like. And I tell you, I saved tens of thousands of dollars because I did most of it myself. And because, well, I was particular in what I wanted in my wedding. And in that creative state throughout my life, even though I didn't set it as a goal, it was still a dream. And when you set things as a dream, in your dreams, right? In your wishes, in your desires, that's where you can do the baby steps, right? You guys hear me talk about the stick with the bag at the end. That's a dream. It doesn't mean that that's going to happen, but that's what I move towards. And I move towards it in a way that's realistic. I move towards it in very small bites. I look at opportunities that come across my path, windfalls, those relationships that come across my path, right? The resources that come across my path. And when those come across my path, because I'm dreaming, I'm wishing, right? Because in the moment you don't have all that stuff, but in your dreaming and your wishing, your imagination, your creativity, these things, right? What you think about is realized. I believe in that. What you think about is realized. And because I thought about it, right? These things come to be. Now, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. But that's where you don't cry over spilt milk, right? You don't complain, you don't whine because it wasn't a goal, it was a dream. And because you did it in baby steps, that was your choice. Because if it was a big enough dream, if you saw an opportunity and you said, oh, I don't think so, that's too scary, right? Or that's going to be too hard, or I don't like them, those are your choices. So the only person that you can blame for that not manifesting in your life is yourself because that was in the choices that you made, right? Because you decided to do it in baby steps. Now, that doesn't mean right or wrong. You just recognized what your capacity was, right? And that's where people beat themselves up because they go, oh, I didn't get that dream. I had that opportunity and I just didn't do it. And then they beat themselves up. I'm such a dummy. I'm lazy. I'm good for nothing. I should have done that if I had that chance to do it again. And the thing is, they don't recognize in the moment their capacity, right? And that's something that I appreciate about myself because in the experiences that we have, my experiences are different. The scary things in my life are sometimes terrifying, where to somebody else, it's nothing. Like, you guys have been with me for a long time. You guys know I'm scared of the ask, right? I'd much rather just go after things myself, do things on my own, right? Take charge rather than ask. And so when I find myself in those positions that say, oh my goodness, I've got to ask for that. I've got to ask for that. If I really want it, if it's a no brainer, you have to be willing to expand and you have to ask, right? But sometimes something that is just uncomfortable to somebody is scary for somebody else. And in being scary, you can sometimes push yourself to do what's scary, but sometimes that scary is not scary. It's terrifying. It'll put you in a freeze state. And lots of times you don't have the capacity, right? You're going to have a nervous breakdown. You're going to faint. You're going to do a bad job, right? You know your capacity, right? But you beat yourself up at that point because you didn't do that. Okay, fine. That one thing that you wanted so bad, you're not going to get it. You failed in that. And that's okay to fail. But were you willing to expand in some other way, to try in some other way, like a baby step or a baby spoonful, right? In dreaming and imagining and wishing, right? And having that great attitude of what you think about is realized, right? And appreciate that if it didn't come to you, it wasn't meant to come to you, right? Because if it really was everything, then you would have found a way. If it was everything, those other parts of you would have pushed you towards it, right? And sometimes it's not a no. Sometimes it's not a not ever. Sometimes it's just a not now, or you're not ready, right? And to appreciate it for that. And I thought I would throw that out there, because I'm a big believer in the baby steps, but I also know how we can beat ourselves up when we don't get things done in the moment, right? It's about being willing to expand. It's about willing to think about the ways, how can it possibly happen? And once you've kind of gone through everything and realized there isn't a chance in hell that that's going to happen, right? Then it doesn't happen, right? And yes, that's on you and you failed in that. But maybe in the patterning, that opportunity might come across your path again, and you might have another chance to try again. And because you thought about it, because you looked at the lessons, because it's a lesson when you don't get what you dream, it's a lesson when you don't reach your goals, that maybe, right, you'll have a better solution, a better way, or because you remembered how badly you beat yourself up because you didn't do it last time, that you're going to give it another try this time, an actual try. You might fail again, right? But maybe that fail might not feel so bad, right? And the next time you try, you might get a little bit closer until your dreams are realized. Everything that I dreamed of as a teenager, as a young adult, came into my life. right? And, I still have goals. I still have dreams, and they change all the time. But I'm not afraid of the change now, and I'm not afraid to chase down what's meant for me because I'm willing to expand, right? There are things in my life I would chase after in a moment, but that block of no, not right now, right? Not saying never, but just not now. But if we're lucky, that patterning will come around again and we'll get another chance, right? So those baby steps, those small bites, in that not beating yourself up, in not crying over spilt milk, in continuing to dream and wish and think about things, it might get you a little bit closer, right? It might. Awesome that you will be going to the festival, Cindy. Yeah, I haven't been to too much all summer. I'm trying to think here what I've really, besides some family things, I really have not done much except spend time with myself. So this is going to be my first event this summer that I'm actually going to be around lots and lots of people, probably in a little bit more of a social capacity than I thought I was, because I'm going to be doing some volunteer work for them too. So, being the social person that I am, that's probably right? It's what I excel on in hospitality. And so, I'll probably work in some capacity like that. So, right. And I'll have an opportunity to meet lots of people. You never know. Might be husband number two, right? Not that I'm looking at that, but right in the moment, in our experiences, in those things that come across your path, change is always happening. It's just about being willing. And at the very least, you're willing, sometimes things will come to you instead of you having to go to that, right? Just because that thing has more capacity than you do. Okay, you guys, let's grab a card, go into it. Thank you guys for coming in and keeping me company tonight. That was really nice of you. I really appreciate that. If you haven't hung out with me before, this is a deck that I put together, 54 powerful words. And sometimes the card that I pull is pertinent to the conversation. Sometimes it's not, right? But and then we go off on something else. But it's how I like to end my live, right? So if you ever look at the title of my live, and then you're 3/4 away through the live show, and you go, well, what's this got to do with whatever the word I'm saying, right? That's what's going on, right? But more often than not, it is pertinent to the conversation. I don't know how it works out that way, but it does. Okay, you guys, let's get into the card. It's always the first perspective, the first thing that comes to my mind. And then we go into it for a few minutes, and then that's the end of the day. And then we start tomorrow all brand new. Okay, you guys. Kindness is a gift that serves all parties. And the first thing that I thought of is, this is a good thing that I'm going to the festival. I'm quite content to be a homebody, but it's important to be social. And more importantly, it's in for me, especially because I'm online and because other people are moving in their lives, using me as the example, because you get to know me after a while. You get to know my limitations. You get to know where my weaknesses were, where my strengths are now, and some of those weaknesses that are still in my surroundings that I still have not gotten a true grip on, right? But this is a lifetime process. And I'm perfectly happy to be the example in the baby steps, because in the baby steps, we're getting that ball rolling. And that's the idea, right? To get some movement in our life. And I understand that going to this festival is a good opportunity to get back into that social setting that I thrived in. Like, I totally thrived in that. I don't know why. Like, I am comfortable on my own, but that's a safety issue. And I recognize that because this is my safe zone, right? This is my space. And because of how much I love mindset, it's my addictions to learning and into understanding and into understanding mostly about those dynamic relationships that are constantly coming across my path. And what a perfect opportunity for me to practice my craft, right? In a way that is just in conversation, just in socializing, in a comfortable state, not just for me, but for other people, because that's the idea, because lots of this is uncomfortable for people, right? And if you can find a way to get somebody to open up, when you can see it, you can feel it, you can understand it, but you don't want to be that pushy person. You don't want to be that person that's going to drill into somebody to make them open up, when you can be in a natural conversation, a fun experience and atmosphere, and be able to pull something out of somebody because they want it to be pulled out, right? Because they want to release it from their life. And that's where I can do the best magic, right? It is magic. It is a beautiful experience, and not just a beautiful experience for that person, right? That gets to be able to let something go, but a beautiful experience for myself. It's not just a kindness for them, it's a kindness for me, because I get to practice my craft, right? In not working in my craft, but practicing my craft, so that the people who do hang out with me, the people who do experience me, right, gets to see the true evidence that it can be done, right? And it's done through kindness. Just like I cranked that guy out this morning. I did it so politely, but he knew. Okay, you guys, that's going to be my good cheer tonight. Thank you so much for coming in. I'll be back tomorrow, 9 p.m. Central. I'll let you know if I got my new tripod. It won't be new, but I will have saved quite a bit of money by getting it at the thrift store, and I do need it for the festival. Okay, you guys, have a great night.